Around August 2016, I was a very single girl. Very, because it had been a very long time since I had been in a relationship. The year started on with me going on matrimonial dates on steroid. And as it happens with any performance enhancer or stimulant, I'm told, as it wears off, you tend to feel more exhausted and lower than even before you had started out. The dates were not just exhausting, they were excruciating. The excess scrutiny you must go through over your dates post your 30s is intense, especially if you've decided to say no to the guy. Family, friends, and their family and their friends pretty much start doing an intervention on you. Even random people. For example, the astrologer won't even comment on my career. Pehle shaadi, baki sab baad mein. As if my future husband was paying for his consultation fees. That's when I decided to take a break from going on any dates, matrimonial or otherwise. Instead, I decided to go on artist dates. An artist date is the idea of making time for yourself once a week on your own to do something enchanting, to play, have fun, or do something that nourishes you. Trying to build this intimate relationship with myself, I had very reluctantly joined improv comedy. Reluctantly because the workshops were held at the most godforsaken locations. Somewhere, all the Uber drivers were always lost. This one evening of September 2016 was no different. My Uber had taken a tour of Bandra, but was nowhere close to where I was. I asked a fellow improviser, Ajay, to help my Uber with directions so that he could come and pick me up. As he was doing so, his best friend Aarti walked in with someone who looked like her boyfriend. We exchanged pleasantries and she introduced me to the guy as a friend. His name was Sandeep. Sandeep looked like a guy you shouldn't assess because he would know that you're assessing him. He had a very Bomkesh, Feluda kind of vibe. He was dressed to blend in and not stand out, which I think is a very sleuth-like quality. And yet his eyes stood out. You would be tempted to ignore him as nondescript till your eyes met his. My Uber driver was still lost. So we began making some small conversation, and our conversation steered towards our workplace. He said he worked for Google. Interesting. I wanted to ask more questions, but I didn't want to seem interested. Instead, Aarti asked me where I worked. Unilever. Oh, Sandeep used to work for Unilever too, she said. Within minutes, we realized we had worked in the same company and in the same office for 3 years. We had even worked for the same vertical, but in different functions and had never seen each other. No wonder you looked familiar. I lied. Because it felt like the only polite thing to do. Before he could respond, my Uber arrived and I left with quick goodbye. Next morning, I went to the coffee shop at work to get my coffee, and as I turned the corner, I bumped into Sandeep. I smiled hello. He did the same. We didn't get a chance to have a conversation then, but I was wondering what was he doing in my office? Hadn't he quit? That evening, as I got home from work, I got a Facebook friend request from Sandeep. Though I regularly get Facebook invites from my guard, maid, doorman, yet getting one from Sandeep was a bit surprising. It had been such an inconsequential first meeting that I wasn't expecting a friend request. My first thought was, how did he know my last name? I noticed we had 22 friends in common, mostly colleagues, and Ajay wasn't one of them. So how much time did this Google employee spend on Googling me? For a second, I thought maybe he knew me all along and pretended not to in front of his female friend. So I accepted the request and let things be. The next morning, as I was getting ready for work, I got a Facebook Messenger ping from Sandeep. "You look familiar," he said. I smiled because that's what I had said when we met on Sunday. And the line used rhetorically was funny. My immediate reaction was to respond. I need to come up with something funnier. But having been single for so long, replies didn't come as quick. Also, I had a slight bias against engineering plus MBA guys. Who are very vocal at work, but when it came to asking out a girl on a date, they tend to lose their voice. And I had met a few who liked online flirting. They would use lines, some witty, some funny, over SMS, WhatsApp, Messenger, till one day the communication died its natural death. It would never lead to anything. I pinged Ajay that day and told him about the friend request and message. He told me that his friend Aarti and Sandeep were not dating. "Are you interested? He's a very good guy, works for Google." Suddenly, Ajay had become Ajay Mossy. I had mixed feelings. I had never been interested in dating someone who comes from my social circle, and definitely not from my professional circle. Work is where I would go to avoid friends and family's attempt at setting me up. I couldn't lose that sanctuary. I also wasn't sure I was ready to date a guy who had 22 colleagues in common with me on Facebook. That evening, I got another ping from Sandeep. It said, "It was a joke, by the way." In all my thinking about whether I should date or not date the guy, I'd forgotten to reply to him. I don't need to explain to the men here what goes through your mind when you think you've sent a witty message. Which goes without a response for 8 hours straight after it had been read. I could almost feel Sandeep's nerves. As we began chatting, one thing led to another, and eventually we realized that we were also neighbors for a year. In short, we had worked in the same campus for 3 years, out of which we were neighbors for 1 year, and yet we had never met each other. There is something comforting about proximity, and knowing that I had been in the proximity with someone yet never met him seemed like a wasted opportunity, something I would like to correct now. We still hadn't exchanged numbers and were still chatting on Facebook Messenger, the longest I have used that app. Back then, I used to live in Andheri East, and I was looking for a house to rent in Bandra. Because he had mentioned he lived in Bandra, I pinged him the next day to ask if he had any broker leads for me. "Actually, I am also looking for a flatmate. Please let me know if you know of someone," he replied. This information did not seem so innocent. It almost seemed like an invite. "I know a guy in my team who wanted to move out. Maybe I could put both of you in touch," I responded. "Okay, thanks." Maybe I was thinking too much and he was genuinely asking. After that, we would chat if he initiated the conversation. I never initiated a conversation. It was not a boy-girl thing. It was a self-preservation thing. I did not want to put in any effort. I was too tired of trying. Once I did write a line to initiate a new conversation, but I deleted it as quickly as I had written it. My past dating experience had made me a bit of a cynic. I was like that Game of Thrones fan who did not want to have a favorite character. Because you knew that if he's your favorite, he will die. But for 2 weeks, there was a lull in our conversation. I was not even more sure that he is one of those online flirters who would never go beyond texting. And he had messaged on Facebook Messenger. On October 2016, 2 days before Durga Puja started in full gusto, I was returning home from work in my car and was waiting for the traffic light to turn green. My car was the first before the zebra crossing, so I could see all the pedestrians crossing. And suddenly I saw Sandeep crossing. It was a bit surreal. Maybe because I had now seen this Google employee more than when he was a Unilever employee. I pinged him next morning. Were you crossing the road at Chakala Junction yesterday? I did hesitate since we hadn't conversed for a while, but I was very intrigued and thought it might be a good way to restart from where we left. I did at some point, came his prompt response. You walked in front of my car. Thank you for not running me over. He replied with a wink. LOL, you're welcome. I couldn't contain my curiosity, so I asked him, what are you doing at Andheri? Isn't your office in BKC? Well, even right now I'm in your office. My workstation was on the 3rd floor. I looked down from the veranda and there he was, walking out of the campus. Why am I seeing this guy everywhere all the time? It almost felt like he is stalking me, or I was looking for him everywhere and finding him. That evening he pinged me and said, maybe we should move this conversation to WhatsApp. Here is my number, ping me. This took me by surprise. Till now I felt he was driving on 1st gear and suddenly he had moved things to the 4th. So now we began chatting, this time on WhatsApp. The conversation was still around the mundane, getting to know each other, when he suddenly stopped responding. After 10 minutes, he pinged. Sorry, was making eggs, he said. Dinner? I asked. Not today, but Friday works. I stared at that message for a full 2 minutes and burst out laughing. I typed a few repartees, but none of them lived up to what he had delivered. Instead, I wrote, I meant if this was your dinner, but Friday works for me as well. And I added a smiley. It was hard to tell what had changed in the 2 weeks, but with that message, I knew I must break my vow to not date. He deserved it. That Friday, 7th October, we went on our first date. 8th October on our second. And 9th on our third. In the next 25 days, we went on 20 dates. Though Sandy's date vehicle changed from Uber Premium to Uber Go to Ola and finally Rickshaw. Sandy's conversation held the same charm they had on chat. Something he has managed to maintain even after our marriage. And as an ode to the ex, he makes them every anniversary for me.